In this video, I'll be showing you how you can get a basic overview of your disk partitions in Windows using very basic Python. So let's get straight into it. Remember, this is only for Windows because I'm using external Windows commands, so this is not compatible with any Unix-based command lines like Mac or Linux. So let's get right into it. I'm using Python 3.9, so let's go. First, I'm using subprocess. Let's import that. I'm using check output, so that should be enough. This is integrated in the built-in Python library, so you'll not need to install anything. I'll import it and define it as SBP to make life easier. So first I'll show you how I will be doing this. In command prompt, you can see this is just very basic DOS commands. So I'm going to be using logical disk commands. So type in wmic logical disk. I'll be using get device ID and get size. So get device ID. This will show you each of your partitions in your computer. So as you can see, I have my C drive, which is my boot drive, my secondary hard drive, and this is my flash drive. So we can just call that using subprocess, and then I can also do wmic logical disk get size. So this shows me in order the size of each partition in bytes, so we can convert that later in Python. So we can use this check output function that we defined as SBP, and then in the first parameter put in the command. So wmic logical disk, let's do get name, get device ID, which we will save as disk name, and then second parameter will be shell equals true. So we can run this, make sure everything's fine. Now let's print this and see what we get. This is a bunch of encoded stuff, so we can just use the decode method. .decode, and yes, now we get everything perfectly fine. So we see device ID and then each thing right here. We're going to be using the split lines method to get each line, and we have to make sure that we note that there are lines and spaces in between each of these. So we can take a look at that. We'll do the same thing with disk size. SBP check output wmic logical disk get size, then second parameter will be shell equals true. Make sure to decode this so that it's in raw string. Okay, now we can just print disk size also, and then it will be perfectly fine. Same format, has the lines in between. Okay, so first what we'll try to achieve is assign each drive into one variable. So let's do the primary drive first. I'll assign it to boot drive. So we'll do disk name dot split lines. As I said before, we're using the split lines method. So let's get the first line. Remember, in Python, the counting starts from 0, so keep that in mind. We can print boot drive device ID, so this is the title, and remember that there are lines in between, so that if we do 1, it'll just be empty if we type in boot drive again. So it goes in patterns of 2s, and in between that is just blank space. So 2, 4, 6, and the pattern goes on depending on the number of partitions you have. So we'll do something about that later. But also, if you notice in the string there's a bunch of white space, and we only want it to be this much. We only want the E in the colon. So we can use the .strip method to take away any remaining white space. Now if we print this, it removed all of it. So in boot drive variable, we also want it to include the disk size. So if you remember, the disk size was in bytes, so we'll need to convert that to. We'll use split lines, and if you remember, it was in the same format, so we can just do 2 for the first reference, the first partition. This is correct, but we want it to be a bit more user-friendly, so we can convert that to gigabytes. Divide that by this number. I did not mean to run it, but let me put these like this. If we print the types of both of these, this size, it's a string, this name, it's class string. So obviously you'll get an error when trying to pass a string and use an arithmetic operation on it. So we're going to need to convert this to a float, because dividing this will probably give us a decimal. And then, okay, so we'll need it to be a float when dividing it. And then we'll need the total to be a string so that we can concatenate it. That worked flawlessly. Now we can see that there's this extra remaining bit that's in decimal form. We can just use simply the round function for that. So just round the total. There we go. And there we go. That worked flawlessly. We can just assign it to different drives too. So secondary drive, and then tertiary drive. Probably didn't spell that right, but that's fine. And then change this, because it goes by 2s. Change it to the corresponding pattern. And if we print each of these on new lines, so concatenate this with the new line string. There we go. So let's assume that we want this to be automated. We want this to run on another computer, but we don't know if it is the number of disks it has. So we can just use try except blocks for this. Let me put all of this as a comment, and then I'll make a function for this. Okay, so we have our test function here. Let's first define this in our function, and then if this is empty, we'll get a value error. So forgot to put this in a try block. Okay, now accept value error. We can either pass, or let's put in a signal to know if it worked or not. So boot drive signal equals true. Set value error, boot drive signal equals false. So that will know if it worked or if there was a primary drive. We won't need to really do that for a boot drive because that doesn't really make sense. You can't operate without a drive, but it'll make sense for other drives. We'll know if the person has multiple drives. Okay, so as you can see, I've put all of these in a try except block, including a fourth drive as an example, because I currently don't have a fourth drive. I only have three partitions on my computer as of right now, so we can run this function, and this function at the end I'll also print all of these. So I put signals for each one. I'll print the signals, so boot drive signal, secondary drive signal, tertiary signal, quaternary signal. So it should come up as true, true, false, because I don't have a fourth drive. So let's run the function. True, 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 false. Okay, worked flawlessly. Now we can know how many drives a person has, and we can give the partition name and how much storage it has. So if this helped you guys, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel for more tutorials like this.